Media and public opinion, when we talk about media and public opinion, one thing that needs to be understood here in this context is media allows you or offers you the space or the platform to look at or to reflect upon what is the public consensus or what is the public opinion. How media does it is when you look at traditional media like newspapers or magazines or journals, you'd have something called a letter to the editors. Those of you are familiar with the platform that newspaper, news media primarily offers, it's like a feedback system. Okay, so you read about a particular news article or an editorial piece, and you want to comment on it, whether you like it or dislike it. What you do is you try to kind of correspond with the editor or the editorial team whosoever has put that news piece forward or that editorial piece forward, and you have some comment to make or some remarks to make. You want to give your feedback. You try to write to them through a platform called Letters to the Editor. Okay, which would be the case in newspapers and magazines and journals, where you get an opportunity as a reader to directly voice out your opinion. And many a times you would come across, if you try to cross-reference stories and try to go back to newspapers and see 4 or 5 people discussing about the same topic, which means that's a part of what we understand as the public opinion regarding a particular topic. Let's say if we talk about farmers' protest. Okay, so right when farmers' protest story was at its peak, you would often come across people writing and talking about the farmers' protest story, or if there are editorial columns reflecting upon those farmer editorial stories in their field. So that kind of shapes up what their opinions is or is reflective of in a very smaller representation. It is reflective of what could be the public opinion. Then quotes and interviews of common people on important political and social issues are also supposed to represent political opinion. Public opinion. No, it could be related to traffic issues. It could be related to scarcity of water in your community. It could be related to stray dog issues. There are a lot of those kind of issues, that civic issues, what we understand as civic issues. So if there are common concerns regarding civic issues, when we tend to discuss about these things, then that becomes a part of representation of public opinion. What the media does is media ultimately caters to the public, or in an ideal scenario, media is supposed to cater to the public. Its primary job or primary responsibility is to make the people aware, educate people, right? Hence, it is unlikely to carry any content which the public would oppose. Many a times that has happened. Those of you are familiar with the concepts of or the situation that happened in India in 1973-74, one most important political situation arose. What happened during that time? Anybody who is familiar with what happened during the period of early 1970s in India? India underwent something called the emergency period. Never heard of emergency period? Yes. So during such situation, what happened at that time, the media, at that point, the newspapers were primarily there. Newspaper publishers and editors, also in solidarity with people, stepped into the protest movement against the emergency. A lot of newspapers and publishers who just published blank newspaper pages as a symbol of their protest against the dispensation or the authoritarian regime of Mr. Gandhi at that point in time. So, offering opinion which is popular is also a part of how media exercises its choices in terms of offering content. Understand that part. So any content that the public would oppose, largely, if the media publishes, media houses are putting themselves on the lines of danger. And there is always a segment of the society which would be unhappy with the kind of content that we publish. If you go back to what we discussed yesterday, like I told you, that because of divergent opinions that float in the market, okay, if you look at the entire population as a marketplace, a residential marketplace, where everybody can go out and voice out their opinion, would we ever come into some kind of a consensus? Because when there are people who are showing their solidarity to the farmers' protest, there are sizable amount of crowd who is also of the opinion that these kind of protests are undemocratic in nature. These protests are led by people who are not interested in the development of this country, so on and so forth. So there is always oppositional point of views. Only thing that you have to see is which one gathers momentum more than the other. Hence, the content in media can be said to represent public opinion. So whatever goes out in the newspapers are reflective of the public sentiments. That's an assumption in most of the cases or situations. Now, there is an issue in how media shapes public opinion. In the next session, we'll talk about uh, awareness creation. I'm going to touch upon it in a little more, and largely in the functional sense. But right now, let's look at what is the issue. When we look at Chomsky's ideas, I'm bringing in Chomsky because he was one of the foremost critics, along with Walter Lippmann, who spoke about how public opinion is shaped by media and what role media plays in creating a circle of propaganda. He says that media can be used by the elites, rather abused by the elites of the society, as there is a manipulation of public opinion that can happen. Right. Thus, the media may also be more representative of elites' opinion rather than public opinion. So there is an elitist opinion and there is a public opinion. Doesn't necessarily mean that public opinion is taken into consideration when policies are framed. Though in an ideal scenario, that is what it should have been done. But the governing elite or the media elite, who very much understand the power dynamic that exists in the society between the rich and the powerful, they know that if public opinion is always taken into consideration, then as individuals and as institutions, they cannot evolve. Economic implications are there. There are economic implications to all these situations. So power, wealth is always concentrated. And that is what a socialist regime, that is what a communist regime most of the time deflates or fights. Whereas a capitalistic society believes in wealth accumulation. It believes in liberal market economy where free trade can be done and anybody can become rich. And no, money and awareness doesn't necessarily come together. But money and decision making can come together and can go hand in hand. So whether you are deciding for yourself or you are deciding on behalf of the public, depend how aware you are and how powerful you are in that ecosystem. of consumption. So what happens here is, as per Chomsky, there's a shortcoming to how we look at the relationship between media and public. What Chomsky says is the content that is put out there to help the public form an opinion is basically offered by the governing elites, is offered by the media elites, and those kind of people. What the media does is it sometimes deliberately and carelessly omits stories which may represent an important aspect of public opinion. Understand, as we speak, public opinion formation is happening. If you are the public, you are already building some kind of an impression about me, about this college, about everything that is happening in and around this society. You have an opinion, all of us have an opinion about it. Like you are thinking about me, I'm also thinking about you. And that's the dynamic that exists all across. Sometimes my opinion takes precedence. Sometimes my opinion takes precedence in forming the public opinion. Sometimes you become the leader or the representative of rest of the public and you represent the matter. In doing so, are you being truthful, honest, unbiased in representing the matter? Or the moment you come into power, you try to abuse that situation. You try to represent the matter that is beneficial to people who are going to favor you later. This is what happens, right? Why certain corporates and industrialists invest or direct funds to political parties to win. There's a direct correlation that exists, right? So that when they come into power, they will get favorable policies, favorable economic and business policies that would help them proliferate. This part is clear, right? So when public opinion is pushed back and elitist opinion is pushed forward, where should media be? That's something that you need to think about. Most media reports also require a balance, that is the representation of both opposing views. Like I said, we need not necessarily agree on everything that is happening in this country. The way you look at it would be very different than how I look at it. We have our own perspectives, we have our own exposures and baggages that we carry. And remember, those things are shaped by a lot of ideas. Where you are coming from. When I say where you are coming from, please don't tell me you're coming from Lotkunta and Alwal. I'm talking about your background, your religious background, your political background, your social background, your economic background, the schools you went through, the education you've had so far, your own personal experiences. All these things are consistently shaping up your opinions. Your opinions about everything around the world. So in such sort of a situation, the news that you consume would also have an impact on you. Right. The news that you consume would also have an impact on you. So those who are producing news, should it not be their responsibility to offer you a balanced point of view instead of taking it in one direction? What happens when news is taken, news production and dissemination or exhibition of news is projected or taken in one track? It becomes biased. So what is happening is you are only going to get one side of the story. That is the reason why right at the beginning, if you remember during the bridge courses, I told you that you must consume news from a 360 point of view. You understand 360 versus 180? That you must consume news from multiple sources. So that later on, when you are offering an opinion which could contribute to the larger public opinion formation, at least you are rationalizing your point of view. There must be a scientific rationale behind what you are talking and how you are talking. If it is not guided by a rationale, which means somewhere you are being biased. I'm not saying biased people do not exist. We all are biased in our own ways. But there are two things here. One is your understanding of the world. Another is your projection of that world. Your understanding of the world is lesser problematic than your projection of the world. When you are projecting, you are touching upon lives. Somebody is getting influenced. I'm talking about journalists, referring to journalists as you. Understand that. So when those kind of decisive moments come, your stands matter. Your stand as a journalist matter. So I hate a centrist point of view. If personally I might be asked, I hate a centrist point of view. That's very convenient to say that I do not believe in X political parties or Y political parties ideology. You believe in something. And if you don't believe in anything, then start a political party. If you think that you are not comfortable with any ideology that is put forward, then there must be some sort of a thing, right? And people say that, you'll often come across people saying that, no, in the next election, I don't want to vote for anything, so I'll just go for Nota. Nota is the most bullshit concept that is ever introduced. In a democracy, there is no place for Nota. What you are doing, you are taking a convenient, lazy, lousy stand by not trying to critically understand what is the manifesto of certain political party and what are the policy level discussions they are having, because you are too bored of watching either the news or whatever is being put forward. And remember, you are the ones who are going to enjoy the benefits of every policy that comes out of the country. You are 19, you have at least 90 years to live. Yeah, I know I'm exaggerating, but I would like people to live for as long as they can. And whether you want to suffer or you want to enjoy is in your hand. What happens is when public opinion favors one view, the balance is off track. In such situation, can we claim that the media is the authentic tool to gauge public opinion? You can't. That is the reason why I'm consistently insisting that you have to consume news from multiple sources. If you have one source, even if that's the best source, still. Because I would never get to know about what is happening otherwise. Because that construction matters. Give me a second. All right. So the next point is, does media truly influence public opinion? Let's look at some more cases to understand how this happens. It is not true that media can influence the opinion of everyone, because there are a lot of people who don't consume media the way it should be consumed at the first. When a person is young, his exposure to news in media is limited, right? And he or she mostly relies on elders, parents, and sometimes friends and relatives for those kind of information. When you're 5-year-old, your understanding about the world politics and whatever is happening in India regarding the economy, the law, the healthcare, any of those things are different, right? What happens here? What happens here is your reliability on those people is, is something where you don't have a choice. You have to rely on this. You're 5-year-old. How much you have seen? How much you have read? How well you are exposed to things? But try and understand, if it is first hand, what do you have to say about 5-year-old kid who have lost their parents to any kind of a human right violation that has happened, a civil riot, a riot that has happened. People in Kashmir, kids in Kashmir, kids in Northeast, do you think they are likely to pick up uh, the anomalies in the system more than you are? Because they get to experience things firsthand, because it is their parents who are picked up, or their parents who are killed, or their siblings, or they are more likely to pick up the situation or develop an understanding of what is happening more rapidly than you are as a 5-year-old, just because of the sheer experience. Whereas what you do is you tend to rely on elders or parents or those people to explain things to you, which is okay. Now, what happens here is interesting. Everybody who you rely on, as far as this information is concerned, is likely to influence you. Is likely to influence you in their own way. Why do you think this happens? Why can't people inform and leave? Why do you have to? How do they influence you? Yeah, okay. So the nature of communication matters. The way things are explained to you matters. I asked for a cup of tea when I was 5 years old. My mother gave me a tight slap. I'm 35. I've not touched tea ever. Yeah, I mean, that milk tea, whatever I asked. Now nobody is going to slap me if I ask for a cup of tea. Okay, they'll happily serve me. In fact, when I go back home, my mother, she doesn't ask me for the kind of tea they consume, but they know that I drink a certain kind of tea, so that's also to me. The point is, imagine what kind of a fear psychosis a kid must went through in that state of denial. Would have been refused, saying that as a kid you are not supposed to consume tea, and maybe when you grow up you can add. Well, it's not good for you. Have milk or whatever drink. No, I was slapped. Not to complain, but this is how it is. So instead of a physical violence being inflicted on a 5-year-old, there could be verbal violence as well. the way things are aggressively put forward to you, that leaves a deep kind of an impression on you. There could be influences because somebody is extremely passionately narrating things to you, explaining to you because they want you to understand, so that you develop some kind of a conscience. Now understand that it is only when he or she is being able to read and write, the 5-year-old, they can understand the content that is featured in the media and form their opinions. Till then, the influences are or the opinions are mostly the ones that is offered to them through the parents or relatives or whoever is trying to influence them. Do you agree with that? So till a certain point in time, you would carry reflection of thoughts that is deep ingrained into your psyche, systematically and categorically, by everything you are exposed to. Till you create a critical framework for yourself to think. Now there is a possibility you might agree or disagree on things with those people who try to influence you. Media comes much later. Your primary source of information is the books that you read, that were given to you, your teachers in school, and your parents, your friends, and relatives whom you hung out with. Right? At this point in time, do you think they still influence you? Do you think there's a difference of opinion when it comes to certain issues with your parents, with your relatives, with your friends? And do you healthily disagree and put forward your arguments? Does that happen? Or you still listen to your parents, or you still think you have to listen to your parents, or your friends, or your relatives, and there is always a dominant understanding which influences you, which is not truly yours. Having perspective is important, but how important it is for you to voice out your opinion, and do you think you can do that? You'll be thrown out of house in no time, and I would tend to assume that you are not earning for yourself to make a living out of that situation. So when you are financially dependent on people, what happens is you have to buy into their idea. But what happens when you are financially independent? Don't you still buy people's idea instead of having an opinion of your own? You have both, possible. But does it happen in every case? So what happens is, the word is called agency. Try to understand. It's called agency. What does this word mean? What does agency and lack of agency mean? There is a scope and opportunity that comes very default to you. The very fact that you could sit here in this class and study is a privilege. There are 19 years old who are out on the streets doing some meager job to survive. Their parents, either they don't have parents, or their parents could never arrive at such kind of a economic condition that they could send those kids to schools and colleges. So people who have domestic helps, you would see if your domestic helps age is that of your mother, and she has or he has, children. They must be of your age in case. What do? Do they go to the same school? So who is likely to have agency? Educated people are likely to have agency than the uneducated ones, who are likely to be more influenced by whatever content that the media is offering. How does that work? Because you still have agency. You have read through. So it is sad when you are educated, but your education hasn't helped you enough to be self-aware. Your education has not made you self-aware. Your education has earned you degrees. Your education has earned you social positioning. That people look up to you when they see you. You have developed a personality and all. But the moment you open your mouth, it's very easy to judge you, very easy to evaluate you. That no, they are not strong enough. Your arguments do not cut across because you are not familiar with what is happening. You're basing your theory at a surface level and moving in and around, which is what happens to a lot of people. Whereas those people who lack agency, they are bereft of opinions in two stages. One, they never got exposed so that they can have an opinion. B, their economic conditions do not most of the times allow them to have an opinion at the first place.